It's March 3rd, my friend's birthday.
2016, March 3rd, Wikispeed, Lynnwood, Washington, United States shop. I'm here with William Newing, Pradeep, and Art.
Hey there.
And William, you're here on car 7. What is it that we've gotten done today?
We did a lot of awesomeness. We mounted the actuator switches for positions 1, 2, and 3, which was awesome. We found longer screws that were 8/32 by 3 inches. So this bar is 2 inches long, gives us a little extra slack. Dr. Joe Justice mounted the actuator relay box, I believe, back there.
Yeah, the control box mounted here with this screw here. And then Dr. Newing mounted a bus bar, positive and negative, with fuses. And it's made by this awesome company, Blue Sea. Blue Sea Systems, this set positive and negative bus box. Totally awesome. Mounted it here for the engine module so we can access electrical drive here. Also, William updated the connection between the linear actuator and the shifter right here to remove some of the potential slop. And it's a little better, but it could still be even cooler than that.
So we'll test that in a little bit once we get the rest of the hoses and wires all bolted and tightened down, as I've tied down to the engine module better. So we're in the middle of that. We're having to take off some of the pieces to make it a little cleaner, getting some of the kinks out of these hoses, thank goodness, because these are actually fuel lines. And here we are. Some of the recommendations we advise is safety gear. We've been having to trim and move some things. Some gloves are coming in handy, and eyewear, as well as do have some paper towels or clothing to soak up some fuel that might be necessary. Also, make sure that the zip tying down and bolting down are to the correct module. If you're bolting it down to something else like the chassis or part of the, the suspension, not so good. Advice I was given also, awesome advice. Be careful when you are testing and starting the car up. Make sure any of that wire that wasn't zip tied down is not fraying in line close to the axle, because that can be very scary.
Yeah, I've damaged multiple wiring harnesses by letting them wrap around the axle while the car was running, because I was like, oh, it's just a test. I don't need to anchor all the wiring harness, and I didn't realize it hung down on the axle. Luckily, we didn't do that today, but that has happened.
And that was great advice. We want to pay it forward and share it with everybody.
Perfect. Okay, so car number 7, as it sits right now, with one person, can be started, shifted out of park to reverse. It should back up then, although we haven't tested that today. We're going to anchor more tubes first, I think. Then shifted back into drive, driven back, shifted back into park, and shut down with one person. So actually, we still might test that in the next few minutes. Well, if not, we'll do it tomorrow. But what's not done is many of the wires have been zip tied to wire stays so that we could drive the car around and they wouldn't vibrate onto a sharp metal edge. Most of them are protected and wrapped in housings, so when they're near metal edges, they have a housing to protect them if they're laying on it. But the fuel lines, tubes haven't all been anchored yet. So the next step is to remove the stock tubes. Now, we could make our own fuel lines and fuel returns, which would then remove the need for much of this extraneous tube. But then we'd have to leak check them, and honestly, I'm just not that good at making tubes. We will at fuel-type fuel lines, pressure-type fuel lines. We will do that eventually, but for now, it's routing and securing the OEM ones. So this car is ready to, I think we're going to take it to autocross and get some feedback on a baseline lap time. And over here at car number 8, with Dr. Pradeep and Dr. Art, we have suspension module version 31, and these two gentlemen are working on the pedal plate module, which includes the steering rack and the brake pedal and the accelerator pedal. All the controls of the car on one module, which are all mounted to this front plate, so it can be CNC'd as a piece and swapped. This is an S2000, a Honda S2000 steering rack, and what they've been doing is attaching 2 M14 by 1.5 thread nuts with washers in right about the straight position on both sides, so they can test this. Got it. But what they've found is with these L brackets that I hastily made in a previous week, is they can rotate forward and back. And when they're rotated forward or even just barely straight down, they don't intersect the rotor. But if they rotate in, they will intersect the rotor. So our job next is to make a different bracket that will rotate less, or have it run on top somewhere where it's less likely to intersect. But for now, they have it almost all tightened. So we can test if the adjustable Ackerman angle pays off here on car number 8. Then car number 8 doesn't have too much that needs to be done before an engine module can be dropped in, gasoline or electric, and taken out to be tested as well. But I'd like to ask you guys, Art and Pradeep, what tip would you give to someone somewhere in the world, at a Wikispeed shop maybe, or maybe just on their own, who was trying to do exactly this? What tip would you give them that might make it easier, or what would you tell them to look out for?
Well, I'd say don't underestimate your work.
Yeah, right? You guys have had to take it off and put it back on and take it off and put it back on in order to find a shape of a configuration that might work with what we've got.
That's totally correct, and I think that was an aha moment, because when you are on this side and when you actually think, and when we talk about estimation, it gives us so much of insight that when we correlate that to the real world when you're building software, is that, oh, you estimated it 2 points, and now why are you changing that to 5 points? And we can totally relate to that, where we estimated it 5 points, but when we actually started working on it, we find it more complex than we thought.
Yeah.
So now
Doubles in the detail.
It pretty much doubles in the detail. So I think that was for sure an aha moment, and I could directly correlate that, and it's a great learning experience.
Oh, well,
for sure.
And maybe even fun. But let's point it. So the task that's being worked on right now is bolt-on tie rod ends, test turning for Ackerman angle. And Art and Pradeep are working on it, and it was thought to be a large or an 8. Well, we have reference stories, and a large or an 8 is fabricate a bracket. And at the end of the day, they can say, is this still similar in size to fabricate a bracket, or is it really as large as dropping an engine module? And they'll get to decide. And whichever of these reference stories it is most similar to, that does get to be its size. So we have an accurate traced velocity. And here's our velocity curve across the top. And that's what we've worked on. The 4 of us were the crew here tonight at Wikispeed's Lynnwood, Washington shop. Thanks, folks.